The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Good day, everybody. Blessings be upon you. Welcome to Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Calvin Sauls. It is such a joy to have you with us today. The 28th commemoration of Independence Day, Freedom Day, the start of democracy in the Republic of South Africa, the land of my birth. It is so good to be here with you as we embark or continue to be on this long road to freedom. To quote the title of the autobiography of the father of our nation, Nelson Mandela. And today it is just a joy to be here and glad that you're here with us on Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Calvin Sauls. And today we have an extraordinary show planned for you, and just glad that you're able to join as we come together. As you know, our theme this year is Breaking Bad in 2022. Breaking Bad in 2022. That means we want to be about the common good. We want to do good, be good, and become the best that we can be. In fact, we want to become our true selves in 2022. That's what it's about for us here at Faith Without Borders. And today, as part of our time together, we will be commemorating 28 years of freedom and democracy in South Africa, and have a distinguished panel of guests with us, friends, family, folk that I grew up with, folk that I work with right now. And so we just want to see how we can bring some perspective to what it is that we would want to see. Well, first, where we are after 28 years. Do kind of ABC, right? Do an assessment on that, see how we need to bridge to where we need to go, and then to see how we can collaborate in getting there, because it's all about how we do and become together. And it's great to be here, for this experience. I want to start off with a quote from Nelson Mandela. He said the following. He said, "Overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It is an act of justice. It is the protection of a fundamental human right, the right to dignity and a decent, way of living or decent conditions." And that's what it's about. I believe that, poverty, especially the levels with which we are challenged with in South Africa, Poverty is genocide in slow motion. And given the fact that South Africa is the most unequal country in the world, and we'll get into that, the question then becomes, at 28 years, where are we? Where do we need to go? And how can we get there? We must get there for all South Africans, for the continent, and indeed for the entire world. And so I am just excited to be able to probably, host one of many conversations, on this topic to see how we can create, a safe space and a free space, and platform for us to have these provocative and truth-filled conversations. That's what it's about. As I said, distinguished panelists joining us all from South Africa. And I know we have some power outages and all of this. So I'm so glad that folk are here. So we're going to try and get to it. And I know we want to hold folk as long as we can, but we understand, given some of the power outages, in some parts of the country, as well as, the flooding going on, it's going to be challenging around that. So happy 28th birthday, South Africa. Our beloved South Africa. Some call it Mzansi and all of that. But just this is independence, and I'm so glad I'm able to do this, right here from South Los Angeles, off Crenshaw Boulevard, right around from Leimert Park, because that's where I roll. I live at the intersection of South Los Angeles and South Africa. I have asked our panelists, to just introduce themselves briefly, who you are, say a little bit about your organization and where you are located, so we can just geographically, identify you. And then, after that, we're going to get into some updates on the crisis that's going on right now, 2 of them. We'll get some updates on that. So we'll invite you to participate and support the work that we are doing. And want to thank the African American Tobacco Control Council here in California for their support of Faith Without Borders, as well as my organization in South Africa, Beloved Community Coalition. And so we're in the house. Several of our coalition members are here, and so we look forward to hearing from them. So let's get in it. Welcome. I'm going to invite at this time Reverend Gxamza to just introduce himself and just say a little bit about his ministry context. And glad to have you here, sir. Welcome, Reverend.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Calvin. Thank you to you, and greetings to the fellow panelists, sons and daughters of Africa across the land and the breadth of the world. I greet you this evening. In South Africa, it's an evening, in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the head of the church and the bishop of all our souls. My name is Alhona. My family name is Gxamza. I am an ordained minister in the Church of Christ, serving under the auspices of the Methodist Church of Southern Africa, which is our connection. I am really basically also a student of history, religion, and politics, and everything really that matters in relation to history, as I hold a firm and unwavering view that history helps us to comprehend the present, but not only that, but also to clearly see and influence our future. So the Methodist Church is guided by a daring theme of a Christ-healed Africa for the healing of all nations. For me, it is the Gospel of John that puts it succinctly. When John says, Christ says through John, I have come so that they may have life and have life in its fullness. So that is who I am. I am not sure, Calvin, if I have left anything. But perhaps before I hand back to you, it is proper and appropriate that we send condolences to families in the province of KwaZulu-Natal who have lost their loved ones in this catastrophe of monumental proportions. Something that has caused a deep pain and anguish. Lives have been lost. People have been left without homes. And so we do want to say to the people of KwaZulu-Natal that even in this situation, they must remember that they are not children of a lesser God. I know that this is rather a sharp contrast because we are a land of the icon, the president of peace in poverty, the man whose statue stands in England to this day. And yet we remain one of the most unequal societies, if not the most unequal society in the world. So I cannot help but agree with Gxamza Rajo, who once observed that all men are born free, but wherever you go, you find men in chains. So with those few words, I thank you for having invited me to take part in this very important conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Reverend. Welcome, and appreciate you getting started and getting in for us. Then that's awesome. I want to invite Cheryl Pillay to just introduce herself. She's coming straight out of my hometown of El Dorado Park, where I grew up in front of her and now work with her, doing a tremendous work as an activist and an advocate, for family stabilization and social cohesion in that great El Dorado Park area. Cheryl, would you introduce yourself and just say a little bit about what you are involved in? Okay, so if Cheryl is not ready, why don't we switch over to Dr. Mary Augusta. Dr. Augusta, Mary Adam Augusta, also born and raised in South Africa, a childhood friend of mine and now a colleague in the work of health equity. You want to just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing, Doc?
Good evening, Reverend Sauls, and to the panelists. We cannot go on without saying from the south to the south.
Right.
That's what we always do. So we have to do our saying. And again, to our viewers and our listenership, it's an honor and a privilege to be with you as well. Echoing the same words as Reverend Akona, to the family and our friends in KZN, we're thinking of you, we're praying with you for restoration and healing, complete healing in our communities of KZN. I'm Dr. Mary Adam. I work at the third largest hospital in the world, Chris Hani Baragwanath, in the field of obstetrics and gynecology. For most people in our community know it as maternity, but it is such a privilege for me to use this platform to engage with my community in various projects, and where I can, I help and connect, strategize to bring about change within my community. So that's where I am, and that's what I do, and I contribute in my capacity. Thank you so much.
Great. Let's go over to Durban, South Africa. Veloshni Pillay, would you introduce yourself from the Fundisa Abantu, foundation and the work that you are doing, and you are right now in the middle of all of this, in South Johannesburg, and grateful for the work that you, your husband, and the team are doing there. You want to just share a little about who you are and the work of the organization?
Hi, Calvin.
Yes.
I'm Veloshni Pillay from Fundisa Abantu. Mission statement is we actually eradicate the plight of poverty in Chatsworth, and we are based in west of surrounding areas, which is in the south of Durban, KZN. We actually assisting at the moment with the crisis in terms of flooding, which we assisting 3 informal areas, and there's a bottle brush, well-bead art, and crossmo. So we assist in terms of the meals, clothing drives, and ID documentation as well.
Great.
So due to this, yes.
Yeah, doing some
Thank you.
doing some great work. And in a moment, I'm going to ask you to just share kind of how our folk are doing. We're gonna see about what people are doing there, and so we'll get back to that in a few. Dorah Marema, she's with me, a senior fellow in racial equity with the Atlantic Institute, and she is joining us. Dorah, are you there? Some introductory words.
Yes, good morning and good evening. My name is Dorah Marema. I am with the Atlantic Fellowship for Racial Equity. I'm also a senior Atlantic fellow with Reverend Sauls. Professionally, I work in local government. I work at the South African Local Government Association. I want to echo my condolences to the families who lost their loved ones in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, but also in KZN, in the Eastern Cape as well. And yeah, I'm excited and I'm grateful to be part of this platform. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dorah, and for all the work that you are doing. We are grateful and looking forward to hearing more about that. Let's go ahead and see if we can pull into right now. Cheryl Pillay, are you here with us? If you would just share some introductory words, that'll be great. Cheryl, are you here? Okay, so she'll make her way over here. Jabu Maitse, my brother, Sedibeng in the house. Some introductory words from you, sir. Okay, so we'll give Jabu an opportunity to join us. Leroy Smith, if you would just introduce yourself, glad to have you with us, today. Just some introductory words from you, sir.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all our viewers, listeners. I just want to again echo the words of everyone else, sending our condolences to the victims in KZN and the Eastern Cape. I'm Leroy Smith, better known as Coach Smiley. So I'm the founding member. I'm one of the co-founders of a group called Love One Freed One. I'm the senior pastor of Glorious End Time Ministries, and I'm also the founding member of Breakthrough Football Academy. So what we focus on developing the person holistically, as the way we did the scripture that says Christ grew in 4 aspects: in favor with God, in favor with men, in stature, and in wisdom. In our terms, we would say in favor with God, spiritually, in favor with men, socially, in stature, physically, and in wisdom, mentally. So what we do use in the glorious, in my operation and in my office as a pastor, I focus on developing the physical and the mental side. In our Love One, Feed One organization, we're focusing on developing the physical and the social side, whereby we teach and feed 200 kids every Saturday. In the football side, we focus on developing the physical side. But all of this is not just done to occupy the individual. As we have heard the phrase, I'm sure before, a kid in sport is a kid out of court. We want to add some sort of objective definition to what we do. So as an organization, Love One, Feed One, we have renovated in this difficult time, post-pandemic, we have renovated 3 homes. We have been feeding up to 300 kids each and every Saturday. In the same period as Breakthrough Football Academy, we produced 40 professional footballers, whereby in the last 50 years in our community of El Dorado Park, we produced 3 footballers. But now with what we are doing in developing the person before the player, we produce 40 players. So we want to obviously add some sort of objective reality. We just don't want to be ambitious for ambition's sake. So we have partnered with various football clubs, various universities, and various companies that offers academic bursaries, so that we can produce a generation that understands meaning. Otherwise, we'll only produce a generation that is obviously distracted by pleasure.
Awesome. Really appreciate that, just bringing in that sports sector around, a nation building and community development. We know the power of sport, not just in South Africa, but around the world. So really, really appreciate, that, and looking forward to hearing more about what's happening. Let me quickly check if Jabu Maitse is here. If you have introductory words, or Cheryl Pillay. If not, we're going to go ahead and move forward. But Cheryl, are you here? And Jabu? Okay. Tony, are you here? Is Tony Sauls here?
Yes.
All right, let me ask. There he is. So I'm going to ask Tony to introduce himself. Tony, of course, is my brother and co-founder of Beloved Community Coalition. Tony, you want to just introduce yourself and just share briefly just some introductory words?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I don't take this opportunity lightly. Just in a nutshell, saying that I'm also a co-founder of the Beloved Community Coalition with my brother Calvin and our sister Leroy in South Africa. And what we are doing is basically building bridges and sharing resources. We work together with others who are already doing some good and extraordinary work on the ground. So we deal with grassroots organizations with whom we formed coalition members, and they are our coalition member organizations. And therefore, we are hoping and trusting that through this celebration or commemoration of 28 years of democracy, we shall achieve even bigger network building and sustainable growth together. Thank you.
Great. So glad to be. I want to go ahead and the two crises we want to just quickly get updates on. Of course, on Good Friday, it was a bad Friday in my hometown of El Dorado Park. The appearance of a sabotage or whatever we know of a electric substation basically plunged about 300,000 people, into darkness and without power. And it's been a challenge to get that up and going. There's an investigation going on, but huge humanitarian crisis, not having that power, especially with winter approaching. If Cheryl is not here, I'm going to ask either Mary or somebody who's aware of kind of what the updates are on what's going on. We know, in addition to hardships that this created, it also created a deep sense of insecurity. A lot of protests, of course, at the site. We're glad the mayor and I hope our elected officials are doing whatever they can to restore electricity in the midst of an electricity challenge in South Africa. So I'm going to just ask maybe Dr. Mary or somebody who's part of our Greater El Dorado Park, response. Mary, I know you come from the faith and health, perspective, but maybe, you and or Leroy can maybe just share some thoughts around, where are we and what's going on, with that. Dr. Mary?
Thank you so much for the opportunity and for the question. With regard to the power outages in El Dorado Park, we know that within South Africa, we've been having load shedding, rotational power outages throughout the country. And in this, it creates much difficulty even for the power stations themselves and the substations, because these creates tripping of the transformers. And the incident that has happened in El Dorado Park recently started on the 13th of this month, where the substation actually caught on fire, and this put a part of the El Dorado Park community and the surrounding community of Devland into complete darkness for close to 8 days, meaning that there was no electricity to some sections in the community that are affected with child-headed households, the elderly, including infants within this community. And some of the factors that contribute to this is not only just cable theft, the continuous load shedding, rotational load shedding that affects the community, but now besides that, we had this power station outages. So it really created us going backward instead of forward in this period of time. And then our community leaders did come to the forefront in order to help the community members and came up with strategies to help the community and how to deal with some of these issues. But these were really short-term solutions during that period of time. What we see now, the community is really taking into its hands is going into the community to areas that have been identified as hotspots to actually look for cable where it's suspected that these groups or crowds are actually stealing the copper cables, holding them in these indwellings, informal settlements, and then actually reporting it to the police. But even in that reporting to the police, there is that hesitancy because in terms of mismanagement, corruption that is happening. So it becomes quite difficult in getting that across. So currently, again, Eldorado Park is thrown into darkness because there's an outage in a substation that supplies Eldorado Park. And that's why Michelle Pillay is not on the call. I've just spoken to her to find out how she's doing, and why she's not currently on the call is because, as Leroy has mentioned, is that the community is in darkness and having difficulty in connecting to the call tonight. So it is devastating. As I mentioned earlier, I work in the largest hospital, the third largest hospital in the world. Cable theft has affected us over the past weekend, where it threw us also into darkness, putting all our generators into function, and then us having now to, at the capacity that we work at, also running out of diesel, and then having to come back to try and serve our community. So it's really cable theft, load shedding, the effects onto our power stations. It's having a devastating ripple effect onto our communities. I'll give over to Leroy, as he's currently in the community as we speak.
Leroy, do you want to just add to what Dr. Mary is saying? And thank you for that update on Cheryl. That's just who she is, always responsive, and has been working diligently and faithfully to see how there can be appropriate responses, in the midst of what's going on in South Africa. And I just want to say that this, sabotage that took place, alleged sabotage, we'll see what the investigation bring out, is in the midst of the fact that South Africa has been going through some power challenges for some time right now, for a variety of reasons. And one of which, of course, is mismanagement. And I think, we're going to do some truth telling here today. And just really see how we can, lean Reverend Gxamza on that scripture. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. All right. Deception is just prolonging oppression, and we are not gonna. That's not what we're about at Faith Without Borders. So we just want to let folk understand that that power outage exacerbated, an ongoing challenge called load shedding or controlled, government-controlled power outages, around that. And even one can ask, many times, which areas are the most affected, and how does, class even play into that, and with the haves and the have-nots, and just the whole inequity piece going on. But we'll get into that in a minute. But Leroy, any other updates around that? And we're going to ask Volosny to give us an update on what's happening in South Durban. Leroy?
Okay. Thanks again, Reverend Sauls, for the opportunity. Not much. I don't want to add much to what Dr. Mary said, but there's also been an increase in violence. I think it was last week where there was a shootout between the councillors. Some of the guys who are involved in cable theft fired some shots at one of our councillors. I'm not sure, and I think they arrested about 11 foreigners from Lesotho. So the violence has increased. In fact, just yesterday, I think the box in Kliptown, the area where you from, Reverend Sauls, was completely stripped naked. There's nothing left. And then we had an incident where the entire community of Kliptown marched over to Eldorado Park Station and threatened to burn down the station. So it's just been a very difficult time where they've called for the entire community to be on standby for whenever violence wants to take its course. One of the problems also, prior to the substation burning out, we had little shortages and little boxes in our communities. Like I've been out for approximately 3 weeks 2 weeks prior to the substation blowing. So this has been going on for a couple of years now, where there's one extension that's without electricity for a couple of weeks. And when this extension gets sorted out, then we have another 2, like Dr. Mary said, the ripple effect from one to another. And you won't believe me, Reverend Sauls, we were out for 2 weeks. And on the day, I think it was Thursday, the Thursday before Good Friday, when the lights went on, I was about to celebrate, and 2 hours later, the power station blew. So it has just been difficult. So as an organization, as a community member, as an individual, we have been running around the block trying to assist, like Dr. Mary said, the elderly people with some hot water, the shortages of food. It's just been a struggle as generators, the petrol runs out. There's just been a difficult time now for not only, El Dorado Park and KZN, but for our country as a whole.
Indeed. And just a sense of insecurity that this brings is just alarming and very, very disturbing. We want to, just put it into perspective, and later on I'm going to ask Dorah to help us with that, both as, from an environmental perspective, but also from a equality and equity perspective around that. We cannot miss the fact around the desperation and the dehumanization that poverty and inequality and inequity create. I don't think it is a coincidence for me to sit here in South Los Angeles, where we are about to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the 1992 uprising and some call it the riots, here in South Los Angeles, as a result of the same challenge, right? That we're dealing with here. And so we're getting ready, to do that. And a lot of activities are starting actually today, going in through, this weekend, around how do we, commemorate that. And I'm glad to be part of several, coalitions that don't look at this as a commemoration looking backwards, but as a commemoration looking forward, as we seek to facilitate a more just and fair Los Angeles, where opulence is just a few miles away, from poverty, as we look at it. Veloshni, let me bring you in around what's going on with our folk in KwaZulu-Natal in general, but particularly the South Durban area where Fundisa is doing some tremendous, relief and humanitarian work there. Just tell us a little bit what's going on. Now, this one has made, of course, the headlines, whereas the power outage and that crisis in El Dorado Park hasn't necessarily made the headlines in the United States yet. And that's why it was important for us to just talk about 2 crises, right, and not just one. And we don't depend necessarily on U.S. media to lead with stories about challenges, in other countries. We got to do that ourselves and be able to tell our stories and what's going on. And so that's the beauty and the power of the Beloved Community Coalition, because we can get updated information from the ground and do not need to necessarily get filtering from South African journalists, not journalists in the United States, but hear directly from people. Veloshni, you are there on the ground, devastating flooding, of course. So many communities, not just disrupted, but destroyed. Children, families, put into situations of insecurity and unsafe conditions. You all are in there, all hands on deck on our behalf. We are so grateful for that. Would you share with us just some updates as well as just some of the work that you all have been doing?
Thanks, Calvin. Some of our updates, we have assistance in settlements, which is our neighboring areas. In Bottlebrush, Welbedat, Crossmore. Mm-hmm. And then we provide meals daily in the city areas. It's a clothing drive, which is a very slow moving process. We do assistance in terms of referrals, ID documents, and birth certificates. demand for assistance has escalated immensely.
Mm-hmm.
So many families, actually for the past 3 weeks now, many families, many homes have been washed away. We don't have electricity and water. So what we have been as an organization trying to assist those families, we've got families in the local community, just as an interim shelter. And we're getting some individuals and business houses to come together to help those in need. So the demand is now getting greater for Fundisa Bantu, where we're trying to assist families in need as well. So my current challenges is mainly the food parcels, where we help some families, blankets, mattresses, school uniform, and mostly clean drinking water. So that's at the moment, that's what we're experiencing now with many families in the south of Durban. We're just assisting 3 informal areas, which they have been affected with the recent flooding. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. We want to just let you know that Beloved Community Coalition is currently, doing some fundraising, and I'm going to ask for Lisa just to put our logo up there and just a link, for folk to go and make, donations. We have now worked with, 5 organizations in both El Dorado Park and in the Durban area, and we have listed some of the direct challenges, that we are working on, and our goal is to raise some funds. In fact, we're going to hopefully distribute some of the funds this weekend, because we want to get it to our folk as it comes in, and we invite you to join us, in donating. We'll get the link up for you, but you can actually go to our website, www.bcoco.africa, and just donate, there, and we will, keep this going as long as we can. We'll get that link up for you, but we'll continue to move on, to this. Again, Faith Without Borders, it's good to have you with us on the 28th commemoration of democracy and freedom in South Africa, and we are here today to look at and to examine and to go a little deeper, doing an ABC model around assessment, bridging, and collaboration, on the theme that we've created, for today, which is Cry the Beloved Country, the State of Democracy, Inclusivity, Equality, and Equity in South Africa. So let's dig into that distinguished panel of guests. Glad that you are here. We've now just put into a perspective, what's happening right now on the backdrop, of 28 years, of democracy. It is no secret that the country is in crisis. Democracy is in peril. However, we are a resilient people. We are hopeful people, and we are people who are driven by Ubuntu, which is how do we collectively uplift one another's humanity as we move forward, knowing that we are all inextricably linked, into a mutual garment of destiny. And it's going to take all of us, to do something about this. That's why we have various folk, on here, around it. I want to bring in Reverend Gxamza again to just, you said something at the beginning, around a quote that men and women are born free, and then after they're born, depending on what the social political conditions are, they then live in chains. You also quoted, a scripture around, life in the fullest or life in abundance. Sometimes we look at that from a capitalistic perspective, right? And we buy into, the illusion of this prosperity gospel that's out there, and it's actually in so many ways taken over. The prophetic, gospel and the work that needs to be done in South Africa around holding, a government accountable, by speaking truth to power in love. Give me, if you will, Reverend Gxamza, your assessment or your diagnosis as to, what is the state of democracy in South Africa, given that just the two crises we talked about, and then also several other things that's going on as we look at all of that, Reverend.
Thank you most sincerely, Kelvin, once again, and to you, sons and daughters of Africa, fellow panelists. Kelvin, perhaps as a point of genesis, it would assist to give a bit of what I would call a definition, accepted, obviously, I know, by everyone. One, when we get into this whole issue of freedom and democracy, the two issues that have been highlighted speaks to the heart of the problem that we are faced with as South Africans, and other parts of the world when it comes to these issues around freedom and democracy. And as a minister, I want really to begin from premising this the submission from the book of Genesis, the theology of free will, and say that freedom is in itself a spiritual entity or a divine gift, something that you get given by God. If we are to move, we will then agree that freedom is a struggle for humanity and human dignity. Hence, I then say, wherever you go, you find men in chains. Nelson Mandela once said, to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. And so freedom, by definition and its very nature, it's a right, Sobukwe puts it, to call our souls our own. And Mandela appendixes on that it not only that, but you also create a conducive environment for others to also be able to call their souls their own. I think the American Declaration of Independence captures it beautifully and more eloquent than I can ever master when it says that all men are born equally and they are endowed by their creator by certain unalienable rights. Among those is liberty, life, and pursuit of holiness. And not momentary excitement, but pursuit of holiness. So it's not freedom if it does not create an environment that is conducive for those who want to invent and innovate to do so, for those who want to be engaged in gainful employment to be able to be engaged in gainful employment. So when you ask us about freedom and the celebration of 28 years of freedom, we can only say it is not yet Uhuru. And I will tell you why. But before I get to that, let me touch also on the definition of democracy. They say democracy is the government of the people, by the people, for the people. And the key question is our democracy or our government working for the people. And for me, that is the defining issue when it comes to both democracy and freedom. You ask us whether we have elections, every 5 years, I'll tell you yes. Our elections with less challenges in terms of, the rule of the majority, I'll tell you yes. Do we have 3 arms of state? I'll tell you yes. But the reality is that our freedom and this democracy is not working for everyone in South Africa. And our problems are not at a structural level. They are right at a foundational level. At a time when we were supposed to negotiate and take our freedom, we were engaged in a romantic conversations that seek to secure the rights of the oppressors of the people. And even today, I have said to you, we are the land of the iconic president, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, the president of peace in poverty. But even today, people have not stopped living in shacks. People have not stopped being impoverished. We are one of the most unequal societies in the world. So when you want us to reflect honestly and meaningfully, I must say one of the things and the challenges is that we have accepted mediocrity as the order of the day. If you walk around or you know South Africa, you are familiar with our context, you would realize that one of our crises, which is a crisis of gigantic proportion, is that we are led by people who are not only thieves, but also incompetent. It's one thing to be ignorant, it's one thing to be a thief, but to be a thief, ignorant and incompetent at the same time can tell you of the nature of our problem. In closing, in this part, when we have time, let's go back to the book of Joshua, chapter 5, verse 9 to verse 12. For me, it defines what freedom and democracy is about. It says, when they arrived in the promised land in Jericho, after they had started Passover and have tasted the fruits of the land, God stopped manna, meaning the provision that God was giving to them. But let me tell you something, Kelvin. We are a society of social grants. Even people that are not working are receiving 350 rands each and every month. And these 350 rands, yes, it is okay. It's important that they be given because that is the duty of the state to help its own people. But it doesn't seem as though there is a clear vision on how to catapult the masses of our country from a state of dependence and place them in a state where they can then begin to be masters of their own destinies. Let me pause there in the interest of time. And I just want to say that these two issues that we have highlighted, they speak to the multiplicity of the layers of the problems that we are dealing with here in South Africa. Let me pause there, my brother, in the interest of time.
Reverend Gxamza, certainly on point for us there, around the fact that, democracy is an invitation to a journey, towards a destination. Even here in the U.S., certainly this democracy is in peril and fractured. And so, yes, that word pursuit is one that one must, lift up and not, take for granted, right, as we do so. So at 28, we would want to see how we can, live up to the three fundamental aspects of a democracy, which is 1, integrity, 2, transparency, and 3, accountability. I am, influenced, of course, by Desmond Tutu. I'm influenced by Vidu Ngobolo. I'm influenced by, Stanley Muhoba, Mgojo, and all those giants, right? That has gone before us. That really basically believe that, as people of faith, we are called to be a prophetic church. When I say prophetic, I mean speaking truth to power. Because that word even got a little confused and convoluted. People think that being prophetic is being predictable, right? And giving people predictions. That's kind of that whole prosperity gospel, illusion and blasphemy that's going on. That's really, the spiritualization of trickle down economics, which has been, what's been going on in South Africa during apartheid and even now. And so one can have the most liberal democratic system, in the world, but if you continue to function with this illusion of trickle-down economics that was based on racial capitalism, you're not going to get too far around that. So we gotta talk economics and equity, and that's why I want to bring in my sister Dorah, who Dorah, just your reflection on assessment, especially from a place of equity, a place of equality, and also a place of environmental justice, because this flooding, one can talk about just how that is about climate change, and we all know that those who are in the 2/3 world are really frontline countries and communities around the threat of climate change, in that. However, an article did come out, I think it was in the New York Times, when he talked about the fact that the flooding and the devastation of it was not necessarily environmental. It was really a failure, right, of infrastructure development that should have taken place a long time, in South Africa. But one cannot miss the point of the environmental degradation, that's going on around the world, and what's going on and what's emanating from the southern tip of Africa, especially with, oil giants such as, Shell, headquartered in South Africa, and from there have their exploitive and destructive tentacles go across, the continent, around that. So, Dorah, just your thoughts, your assessment on where we are as a democracy, and then we're gonna check in on the health piece, and I'll bring in Dr. Mary for that. But Dorah?
No, thank you very much, and I think your inputs in terms of where we are at is very accurate. But I think one of the most important thing is to realize that, even after all these years, South Africa remains one of the most unequal societies in the world. And, there are obviously, some kind of efforts by both civil society, and communities to try and bridge the gap. However, it feels like, we are regressing, really more than actually making strides into bridging the divide. And I think it is, all of these things are being exacerbated by quite a number of things, exacerbated by the global climate change that is taking place around the world, with very serious projections for how its impact will affect Africa as a whole, and what we have seen happening in the coast of KZN and into the Eastern Cape is not something that is new. I think we have had the science telling us in terms of the impacts, and even in that week, I remember that there were some warnings that went out from the South African weather service, but our disaster management function in this country is not geared to be responsive, to put measures in place to really reduce the likelihood of loss of life and destruction on infrastructure. And the messages, even though they've been generated, accessibility is still a challenge in terms of who is able to receive this message. And once the messages have been received, say by the local authorities, what means are there to be able to avert the loss of life? What even during the disasters itself, our country is not geared to be able to be responsive in, as compared to other countries that have faced challenges like this. What I want to talk about, to highlight, is the fact that there is a serious role that has to be played by the local sphere of government. And I think by that, I mean that for the longest of time, we have seen the 2 points. I always see local government as a triangle, which consists of the political, the administration, and the community. And I think what has been missing over time is the community arm, where I feel that the community has not been seen by local government as being an active part or in that triangle. It's been regarded mostly as customers or people or recipients of services, but not very much the people that needs to shape how local government policies and strategies and budgets are being put together. And I think that as a result, we see that the many solutions that are being put together, the many policies and strategies and plans that are being put together are not reflective of the needs of the communities within which these local authorities exist. And I think it's time that as South Africans, we really rise right now to really reclaim our place in this local government. We cannot just engaged during the time of elections where we are supposed to be electing the so-called representatives. But when it comes to putting together the plan in terms of how the 5 years of tenure of those that we have elected, how they are going to be leading us and providing us with services, that our voice is not present. And I think it's in this past year, when during local government elections, we have seen some independent candidates. And I think from where I'm sitting, I'd like to be able to see more, because those independent candidates are the people that are nominated by the community themselves. They sit there at the pleasure of the community. And should the community not be okay with how they are doing things, they have got the authority to be able to recall. And I think we need disruptions in the system like that, to be able to, for the community to take their own rightful place, to dictate in terms of who represent them, but also how the resources that are allocated to their local authority are being planned for and spent, because that links very much, Pastor Kelvin, to what you're talking about, the infrastructure maintenance backlog, where the things that are supposed to have been done are not being done. They are not being prioritized. You find that a lot of budgets are being passed by councils, but those budgets are not being funded, meaning there is a budget, but that budget doesn't have money backing it. And that cannot be. It cannot continue like that. And if we are to be able to effect change, we need to really look at the role that the community has to play and should play, and reclaim that and disrupt the common cause. It can't be that we continue business as usual in this time where we know that if we are not going to be looking at climate resilient infrastructure, not only maintaining our current infrastructure, but also building infrastructure that will withstand the projections that the scientists are telling us in terms of climate change. It has to. And unfortunately, municipalities tend to go for low-cost solutions purely because the budgets are not enough, are not being allocated where it matters the most. It can't be that kids can stay out of school just because there has been a severe torrential rain. It can't be. And I think it's important that we really rethink in terms, even going back in terms of rebuilding. It can't be that we are just going to go in and patch in the same way that we've been seeing the patchwork that has been happening in our own communities. It is time that we need to rise up, we need to revolt, in a sense that we need to take our rightful place, because unfortunately, we are the ones that we are waiting for. We can wait and we'll wait forever. Unfortunately, people promise, and when they take these positions, they are not going to deliver in the same way that they were canvassing when we tend to appoint them. And I think it's important that those of us who have been sitting in the margins, even in the faith, we actually consider to actually look at opportunities to run for political office as representatives of our own communities, and not stay on the fence, but actually consider playing an active role to actually be a disruptor in this business as usual, and that has been happening. The stakes are really, really high. the extreme climate events are not going to get better. They are going to get worse. And that is a fact. Whether the issue in the coastal area of KZN and Eastern Cape is not climate related one, is because it's a mixture of those of a number of things. A mixture in terms of lack of maintenance, lack of infrastructure development, huge backlogs, but essentially the extreme weather events in those areas are going to be even more frequent. So we are not going to be waiting for a 2017 flood that will come in 2019 and now comes in 2020. It may come even next month. It may come even next month and find that we are still sitting with the destruction that we are currently trying to resolve right now. Yeah. And it's important that when we build for the projections that the scientists have been telling us, really durable, climate resilient infrastructure that needs to be considered. And we are to be part of making sure that happens, because if the right plans are not being put in place and budgeted for adequately, we are constantly going to be finding ourselves where we are. Thank you.
Indeed. We are the ones we've been waiting for, prophetic words from our women, in South Africa at that historic march, right? And so you're right about the importance of, bold and I would add to that, I mean, big and bold collaboratives. I want to acknowledge those who are joining us, via YouTube, as well as those who are joining via Facebook. Thank you for your comments. We got folk with us from Los Angeles, from New York, and from South Africa. So just glad to see, folk in the house. Please share some comments, some awesome comments, that are coming in of affirmation. And so we're glad that you are with us. Great to see some comrades here, from El Dorado Park. Nancy Heron is here. And of course, with us from Pretoria is Bishop Sidwell Mohotu. Thank you for being here. I want to acknowledge my fellow South African here in Los Angeles, Reverend Vanessa McKenzie. That's here with us, and glad that you are here with us, and appreciate all the comments. Check them out, folks. Democracy is not a spectator sport, right? It is all hands on deck. Dorah mentioned that triangle that's so important around national government, local government, and then civic engagement. And that's an integral part of how we do what we do here, in Los Angeles in general, but in particularly, South Los Angeles. In fact, we have been pushing, here in Los Angeles, our mayor to come to terms with the fact that as the second largest city, with over 50% of its budget allocated, for law enforcement. Now, listen to it. Now, a budget is a moral document, right? So it speaks to where your moral values lie. So if you have over 50% of a budget, which is, a little over $2 billion, going to the Los Angeles Police Department, right? Then that sends a message. So we've been pushing for and fighting, with a collaborative group of folk, a network here in South Los Angeles, which includes Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, which includes Clergy for Black Lives, and several other prophetic faith leaders for a participatory budget process. After all, it's our money. We're the ones paying the taxes. And Reverend Gxamza, if we have folk who are both ignorant and incompetent, that just gets to be elected by way of popularity or nepotism, then certainly that's a recipe for disaster. So civic engagement in any democracy, which means representative government, is going to be essential, for us. So I want to say to our South African brothers and sisters, you cannot sit on the sidelines hoping others, right, will rise up and speak up. Democracy allows for disruption. It allows for dissent. And of course, we don't do it to dehumanize, right? We don't do it to be destructive, right? But we have to come to terms with the fact that intention without action is a exercise in futility. Legislation without implementation is an exercise in futility. Come on, somebody. Resolutions without solutions is an exercise in futility. All hands on deck. And one of the most challenging piece that we face, we had in South Africa an epidemic before the pandemic, right? Is, of course, this whole health inequity piece that we are dealing with in South Africa. Dr. Mary, you've been on the front lines around that, including what's been happening at the Baragwanath Hospital with you all as medical workers, and the back pay that you haven't received yet because of the oath that you've taken around life and making sure that people are well. You've continued, to do that. The food inequity that folk experience as a result of that, and organizations having to come from the community to bring food for the patients and for the staff who have decided to stay there, regardless of the fact that they didn't get paid, to make sure that folk receive health. We have to understand health equity is a matter of security. And that's why I continue to believe that until the UN Security Council come to terms with what needs to happen around COVID on a global scale, then we are just limping along, right, with folk making political decisions, around this particular challenge. So, but here we are, right, around the challenge of health equity in South Africa. Dr. Mary, your thoughts on that, and then I want to bring back in, Valoshni and Leroy, to bring some of their perspectives as ones who are on the ground, also working on all of this. But Dr. Mary, we've been at this now for a long time, and glad that you are, part of that faith and health equity, faith and health collective, that we've created. So your thoughts, on the state of democracy and how it impacts health.
Thank you so much. Health is one of the pillars that strengthen our communities, therefore strengthen our societies. And if you have a broken healthcare system, you'll have an ill society. And how do you then go out and work? How do you go out and educate? So it impacts on all of these other pillars within society. So it's very important that we actually do look at health as a priority, and often it is not taken as a priority. And just as Ms. Dorah Marema had mentioned, in terms of prioritizing and having action planned or strategies to actually overcome that, we won't move very far. And I liked her three-pillar demonstration of politics and community involved in that. And I think one thing about South Africans is that we do not lack the ability to stand up for when it is wrong. I think we're often broken when we get to the front line to actually help. And we get fatigued because after every problem, we come up with a solution, we engage, we find ourselves in the forefront, but then we are broken by the things that the red tape, we are broken by the budget, we are broken by, he said, she said, we're broken by corruption, we're broken by mismanaged, maladministration. So then what do? We go back to the drawing board and see what we can do. So as South Africans in the communities, we try to do the best that we can do to overcome some of these things. And what's great about us as South Africans is that we often not reactionary. We try our best to be pro-action, but COVID has shown us that, we are still a caring community. And again, with the KZN floods, we are a caring community. So I think our communities are not lacking in terms of showing up. We are broken by our leaders who, like Reverend had mentioned, Alhona, that, we are led by people that don't care. They lack competence, and they're ignorant to the things that are facing the people. And this should be ringing alarms in the leaders that we have, because what they stand on is that our ancestors, like Nelson Mandela, like the great Sedibeng, like the great Steve Biko, are they not turning, like Chris Hani, are they not turning in the graves when they see and hear the things that we have become in the society that we live in today? This is not what they envisioned. This is not what we had fought for, but here we are today. And healthcare is one of those things. So in the 2020 Global Health Index, South Africa again featured as the 49th country out of 89 countries in terms of healthcare. You also find within South Africa, we have two layers of healthcare, where you have public sector and you have private healthcare sector. Our infrastructure within public sector caters for 71% of our communities, of which is the poor communities within South Africa, whereas in your public healthcare sector, where the infrastructure is much better, which is privately funded, is catering to 27% of our population, and that's often seen in the wealthier communities or those who can afford private healthcare. This inequities from inequalities have been, well, from 1994, there's been a bill that has been tried and to be put forward, and that's the national health insurance. And yet time and again, we're not seeing this sort of bill come to pass, a bill that was supposed to, a bill that is seen to create this equal balance. It tells us it is flowered so nicely, but in terms of how do we see it, how we turn the soil, plant, and now see it come to fruition is not there. The mechanism of how we're going to bring it about is not there. And that's why since 1994, we have not reached a place where we can say healthcare is there for all. So again, like Ms. Dorah Marema had said, we're lacking in what are we saying in our policies? How are we going to implement those? How are we going to build infrastructure to actually accommodate for the climate change and for our changing communities? Not there. We submit data on a day-to-day basis in terms of how many births are there. We submit data on what our health indexes are, but these are not taken into account as a projection as to what our country needs in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And therefore we're sitting with overcrowding. We're sitting with a lack of skilled staff to continue to take care of a community that is here. We are now facing issues of saying that our hospitals are filled with foreign nationals, but we're not addressing the issues that come from other sectors to actually make this actually a working environment for all, a safe environment for all. So it's multi-layered, multifactorial, and how do we overcome this is by dealing with the source. It's taking it back to the politics of things, dealing with our leaders that are sitting in positions that can actually make a difference from that level, from management level, and rooting out maladministration, ruling out corruption, dealing with the budget. I said, why is there no money for us? The answer I got is that there is money, it's just not allocated for you. So where do we start? There is money, but the money just does not get to where it needs to be done. So we need to change our perspective. We need to change our outlook. We need to know who do we want to serve, how do we want to serve them, and make sure that we get to the point of the matter. We are tired of having to say there's the money, this is our budget, but then 600 billion or 600 million gets taken away from the budget by corruption.
So I mean, that's what we're dealing with, and we've got to get to the bottom of this, folks, because if we continue with this, economic system, and in a minute I'm going to share the quadrilateral for me. Dorah talked about a triangle. I believe is a quadrilateral because you cannot leave out, the economy. You cannot leave out corporations. You cannot leave out, those who continue to exploit and operate. As if apartheid is still in fact, by just letting a few, black folk into their boardrooms or making them millionaires, while leaving the rest of the folk, in poverty. So that's just so important. And so I want to quickly just read, a question, Dr. Mary, that I want to address to you quickly before I go to Voloshin and Leroy, and we're going to transition to solutions here. We know that poverty and inequality, is very traumatic, and mental health is health, right? We might be in denial about it, whether we are in the U.S., and in South Africa. But mental health, your mental health is your health, right? Can you maybe just, and we'll probably do a show on this another time, but just, Reverend Mackenzie is just checking in to see about, just the state of mental health, in South Africa, all of our folks. Can you just, give a little sense of that as you work on the front lines, as you see, folk both at hospital and in community, just kind of your sense around the state of mental health with folk in South Africa in light of the trauma caused by poverty, inequality, inequity, etc.
Thank you so much, Reverend Mackenzie. Yes, now with COVID, we've seen it actually come more to the forefront, because we've seen that even prior to COVID-19 is that poverty, inequality, the effect on unemployment, landlessness, homelessness, HIV and AIDS, and associated diseases, even in terms of food security, we've seen the impact, but greater so in COVID-19, where health facilities and even private institutions related to mental health actually came to the forefront, providing services to our communities in different sectors. And this was because you could see that people were trapped within their situation and were not able to get out of their situations, and then trapped within themselves. And so mental health is something that has come to the forefront, and those seeking mental health services. But importantly, we've seen sectors where people's livelihoods have been affected, where the rate of suicide has increased in these sectors, particularly our music industry. That's where we've also seen that a majority of our artists and our musicians who have been affected greatly, and still we're hearing of emotions of depression, emotions of inability to cope with the situation that they find themselves in, and looking at these major crises that I've mentioned previously just being exacerbated. So yes, public and private sectors have come to the forefront to highlight this as a priority in healthcare, and not only for society, but also for those looking after patients within our healthcare systems.
Yeah, just for those who think that as people of faith we sometimes don't need to deal with that. Well, be he transformed by the renewing of your mind. All right, so let's just be clear that this whole piece about mental wellness is something that I'm certainly committed to, and we've had several shows here on it, and so we'll do one specifically related to South Africa as part of the series around Cry of the Beloved Country, the state of democracy, inclusivity, equality, and equity in South Africa. Folks, this is Faith Without Borders. So glad that you're joining us. I'm your host, Pastor Calvin Sauls, and glad that you are here with us. I mentioned at the top of our show that we want to follow our ABC strategy here. That is assessment and then bridging into solutions, and then of course talk about how do we collaborate to implement these solutions as we continue to commemorate the 28th anniversary of democracy and freedom in South Africa, and that commemoration certainly is an invitation to participation, because democracy is a contact sport. It is not a spectator sport around it, and you don't just get active when you have to vote. You got to engage on an ongoing basis. As South Africans, we know how to do that. If we did not, we will still be under the bondage of the ideology and the theology of apartheid. We've overcome that, but certainly we remain in the wilderness as we march on. Some of you might, kind of wonder why we're talking on this day where we're supposed to celebrate, and we are celebrating by commemorating, but also bringing analysis to the state of where we are as a democracy, as a country, and to see how we can speak truth to power. I'm with James Baldwin, as a prophetic person of faith, that will say that I love South Africa more than any other country, probably except the United States, even though I got a lot of issues with what's going on over here. I love South Africa more than any other country in the world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize South Africa and the South African government perpetually until we arrive at beloved community, Ubuntu, and Uhuru. That's where we're heading towards. And until we get there, it's going to be gloves off around how we need to speak truth to power in love, and once again push us to a Kairos moment around how it is that we indeed can have, a South Africa that works for everybody and not just some. South Africa cannot become a reflection of the United States, because that is kind of what's happening here around inequality and the threat to democracy that this racial capitalistic, system is perpetuating here. We want to get to that B around bridging and then solutions, and then we're gonna, finish up our time here. Actually, really just pause because, as I said, this is probably going to be a series for us as we do this work together. I want to bring in Veloshni again. Veloshni, just share your thoughts around how do we bridge into solutions. You are living into those solutions. Leroy, you all are living into those solutions, in the organizations that you are part of and the work that you are doing in South Johannesburg, specifically Alhona Park, and KwaZulu-Natal, specifically South Durban. But Veloshni, just some thoughts from you around just some solutions we can be bridging, and collaborate on as we, move forward, on this journey, to democracy and freedom.
Thanks, Calvin. Fundisa Bantu, we have been assisting with many elderly youth and children in the healthcare facility, as many of them do not have access to resources. So what our organization has done is we're bringing the local clinics, hospitals to our center for assistance. Many are distressed, lack of income, no monies. So we got in the provincial hospital, local clinic, and they are together with us in the forefront. So what we try to do is only time will show that we can work together to build a great nation. When we become a democratic SA, kids born in that era do not see a color difference. They have learned to coexist. So I think we all should learn from the kids. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Veloshni. Appreciate that. Leroy, the sports sector plays a huge role, even though Bafana is not doing that well right now, right? But, folk are still, Chiefs fans and Swallows fans and Pirates fans. I can't even believe I'm saying Pirates. Oh, my goodness. But anyway, Pirates, and some of the other... I had to say Kaizer Chiefs because, if Bishop Mohotu had his way, he would have a robe in Kaizer Chiefs, colors and emblems because, he's Chiefs all the way. Sports sector plays a huge role. So grateful for what you are doing around allowing it to be a path to character building, a path to, community upliftment. What are your thoughts around some solutions and how do we breach that and collaborate on it?
Again, thank you for the opportunity, Reverend Sauls, and to all our listeners. I heard you mentioned earlier that we are still, or we might possibly still be stuck in the wilderness. But in what we do in producing a generation of absolutes, one of the categories of an absolute, we believe, is forgiveness. So what we currently seeing right now in our country is more than 50 years of history and the logic of unforgiveness. So allow me just to share a couple of thoughts with you. If we look at Jonah, many of us look at Jonah and believe he's a disobedient or a reluctant prophet. But what many of us fail to understand that Jonah is not some sort of reluctant or disobedient prophet who was commissioned to go to Nineveh. Instead, went in the opposite direction to Tarshish. But what many people does not know about Jonah is that he was reluctant to go to Nineveh because the Ninevites were ruthless to his people. Right? And then I want to also bring into context, I don't know if we're familiar with an author called Simon Wiesenthal. He penned a book years ago called The Sunflower, where he speaks about all of the atrocities in the Holocaust. And he speaks about, in one section of the book, he speaks about how the Nazis came into his home and dragged his mother, dragged his family, and eventually dragged more than 89 members of his immediate family. And then at the later stage, they brought him to a concentration camp. And while he was at the concentration camp, one day a nurse walked up to him and asked him if he was a Jew. He replied, "Yes, I'm a Jew." And he said, "There's someone who would like to see you in the hospital." As he walked to the hospital, he came across a guy who was bandaged from head to toe, only with an opening by his nostrils, his eyes, and his ears for him to listen, to speak, and to see. And he asked Simon Wiesenthal if you were a Jew. He then replied, he said, yes. And then the gentleman said, I'm dying a very painful death physically, but even more so a painful death emotionally. I'm asking you on behalf of your people, if you could forgive me. Simon Wiesenthal, says he stood there for about 30 to 45 seconds and tried to gain the courage to even figure out if he had the prerogative to pronounce the man forgiven. And then after a minute or two, he left the man in silence. And after years of pondering and thinking about whether he had done the right thing or the wrong thing, he wrote to about 32 important personages around the world, some Nobel laureates, some experts thinking in theological thinking and psychological thinking, and they were divided on their opinion. But what I'm trying to say, Reverend Sauls, I'm only trying to bring into historical context how deeply one can act with moments in history locked up in intensity and hate, right? And so people were first impious before they were immoral. So we need to always understand that impiety always precedes immorality. And we cannot merely symptomatically change the laws. We have to change the hearts of people. And only God is big enough to do that. So forgiveness is an essential part of an absolute. And yes, we can build the infrastructure. I have realized in the sporting industry, I've realized in any other industry outside of the sporting industry, that if we don't develop the person, if we don't shape the person, if we don't equip the person spiritually, if we don't equip the person physically, if we don't equip the person socially and mentally, we will never allow them to reach their full potential for what they were meant to be. Is it C.S. Lewis that says we have to orientate people further into the future? But what I think is that we are still stuck in an unforgiving state. Not so much that we are still stuck in the wilderness, but in an unforgiving. And Mandela, I think it's Nelson Mandela who says, holding a grudge is like me drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. So for us to move over into the promised land, if I'm under correction, if I'm speaking properly, I think some of the founding members of the ANCs were spiritual leaders. And if we have to go back into when Moses led the people out of Egypt in the Exodus, they all wanted to, at a later stage, they all wanted to be like the neighboring states, and they all wanted a king, right? And I just think that the same way in which when Moses, when they got their king, I think their first king, speaking under correction, was Saul. But the glory was still present with Saul, because with Saul, there was a man and there was a voice of God still present. So in all the neighboring states surrounding Israel, the king told the prophet what to do. But in Israel, the prophets told the king what to do. Whenever Saul went astray, there was a knock on the door. And who was at the door? It was Samuel. And then at the later stage, when David was king, whenever David went astray, there was a knock at the door. And who was at the door? It was Nathan. But if you can remember, when Solomon became king, no matter how far you search in scripture, no matter how far you search in the Bible, you'll find out that the prophetic voice was lost. The voice of God was lost. The glory of God has departed. And Solomon, with all his wisdom, used all his wisdom for self-glory. The palatial environment got grander, the home got grander, the cars got grander. And isn't that what we're seeing in our current government and in our current leadership today? So we just have to get our people to understand the importance of forgiveness. And when we do pass that step of forgiveness, I think we can take the next step into the unity, where we can then get the unity in our diverse cultures, in our diverse beliefs, in our diverse religions. And once we can get that unity, of which maybe we are 2 to 5% in that direction with the coalition happening now in our country. I'm hoping that we can build a better South Africa by building better infrastructures. Personally, from my own opinion, as a football coach, as a professional football coach who produced 40 professional players in our community and even 5 internationally, I believe, like you so mentioned now, that we can produce Ballon d'Or players. Mm-hmm. We can produce gold Olympic athletes, but it is the state of our community. It is the state of our environment. It is the state of our country that does not allow us to produce this type of people, because we don't equip our athletes as a person. All we do is equipping them for competition. And what's essential in competition is understanding. There's a lot of, like you mentioned earlier, mental training that goes into this. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of social training that goes into this. It's not easy to become a world-class athlete. All the adversity that you face, all the challenges that you face, you have to be able to conquer through it, not in spite of it. So in us developing these world-class athletes, in developing these world-class footballers, in developing these world-class individuals, we have to make sure that we equip them holistically from a spiritual perspective, from a mental perspective, from a social perspective, and from a physical perspective, which I feel is all essential in order for us to achieve our goals. So the fundamental years we understand is important. The fundamental years of conditioning is birth to 12. Whatever you do within the first 7 years of your life, you end up doing 90% of it for the rest of your life. So we need to prepare our people at an even younger age. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that once we can bring back the voice of God in our schools, once we can bring back the voice of God in our homes, once we can bring back the voice of God in whatever we do, then we'll have a chance of building a better South Africa.
Absolutely, absolutely. Indeed, that voice must be returned. It must be a prophetic voice. It must be a voice that talks about the importance of not just being colorblind, but a voice that do talk about uplifting the humanity of everyone. I agree with you 100%, Leroy, around forgiveness, but we want to be very, very clear that forgiveness is a port of entry that sets us resolutely on a journey of accountability as well as equity as we move forward. We it's sometimes, while I agree with what Madiba is saying, you have to also understand what Madiba did. That what follows forgiveness is, of course, and this is in individual relationships as well as systemic or in collective relationships. Forgiveness, for it to be significant and substantial, has to be followed by reparative and restorative justice. That's very, very important. And that reparative and restorative justice has to take place between individuals, but it also has to take place structurally, in terms of that. So I think it's important for us to just realize that we can't just part of restorative justice is accountability without necessarily violating a person's humanity, right? Around that, and we have yet to get to that in South Africa. A lot of us have forgiven, but we are still waiting, for this work of reparative and restorative justice, to take place, and that's why we have to deal with, the capital and the wealth of this country still being controlled, by a very, very few people, that has yet to relinquish, what is rightfully that of everybody. So it is a journey. It's a long journey to freedom, and in the midst of all of it, we need God's voice, to come and lead us, towards, a beloved Mzansi, as we, make our way towards Uhuru. We said at the top of the hour that our theme is Cry the Beloved Country. Certainly, If you know me, that crying, yeah, it is about tears, but as one who's been deeply impacted and affected by the theology and spirituality of the Reverend Dr. Stanley Mokgoba, one of the books that I picked up right before I left South Africa 30 years ago is a book that I still have handy no matter where I am. It is his book entitled Tears of Hope. So whenever we cry tears of hope. And in so doing, I want to, for concluding remarks, just bring in, and I'm going to get each one of you about a minute and a half. How in this moment, at this time, can we invoke these words from the Reverend Dr. Stanley Mokgoba, the former presiding bishop of the Methodist Church of Southern Africa? How can our tears be tears of hope when Good Friday was a bad Friday for folk in El Dorado Park, where right now the devastating floods, has brought and continued to bring crucifixion experiences amid a season of resurrection? How can we cry tears of hope? I think that's the question I'm begging, and I hope when I'm there in Pretoria at some point, I'll be able to check in with Reverend Dr. Stanley Mokgoba and ask him that question. How do we cry tears of hope right now? But seeing that I have you all here, let's start with Reverend, then we go to Dorah, Dr. Mary, and make our way down. Just take about a minute and a half. How do we cry tears of hope for such a time as this? Reverend Gxamza.
Well, thank you. Again, my brother. Anthony Limbede, writing to Umthetheleli Wabantu in the 40s, once said that we will never realize our freedom until we have arrived at a point of realizing our divine mission. And in 1949, at the University of Fort Hare, Sobukwe, using a Methodist hymn, a charge to keep I have, paraphrased the hymn and said that we all have a mission, a nation to build, we have a God to glorify, and a contribution clear to make towards the blessing of mankind. I do want to say, as I close this evening, that I reiterate what I said earlier, that it is not yet Uhuru. I am a proponent of forgiveness, but I sometimes think that we need to rethink our strategy of forgiveness. Our project of liberation was abandoned right at a critical stage and moment at the table of negotiation, if you ask me, misnegotiation, because the primary item of conflict was the land of the people. That's why many people died. In the language of Mahlangu, saying to the African children, do not cry, for our blood shall water the tree of freedom. To this day, we have not enjoyed the shade under that tree of freedom. And my submission in the crying of hands of hope, of tears of hope, is to say, friends, time for being victims of lamentation and complaining about where we have been has come to an end. The African child needs now to wake up, and I agree with my sister that we need to participate in the shaping and influencing of our future. We have been in sleep or slumber for far too long. And there are three ways of being asleep. You can be in deep sleep, you can sleepwalk, you can sleep through hypnosis. But I think the time for us to wake up and say enough is enough, and begin, amongst other things, to reject these people who claim to be leaders when they know that they are not leaders, but rather misleading God's people. They are taking us back. Professor Busak says Pharaoh on the both sides of the Red Sea. There was a time when the likes of Mobutu and others were engaged in the struggle, when they were told that all authority comes from God. And the book of Hosea, chapter 4, verse 8 says, they have appointed prince and kings without consulting me. And therefore, it is not every leader that is of and from God. We need, as the people, the danger with democracy. It's the assumption that people know what they want and therefore will demand it from their leaders or representatives. And so we need to educate our people and begin, those of us who are already enlightened, to reject these leaders who purport to be standing for people when they know that they are engaged in the politics of the stomach. Watch and learn. I'm not a prophet of doom. Beyond this 1 billion that is allocated for KwaZulu-Natal, there shall be a commission that will sit and deal with issues of corruption around that. And until, my brother, friends, sons and daughters of Africa, we are masters of our own destinies, we are not free. Until, friends, we are able to determine our future and tomorrow. This is just positive, what is called by one writer, positive a conflict in a way that even though we are not fighting, but we can still feel the heaviness of the yoke. So I want to say to Africans, let us wake up from our sleep and our slumber and remember that Christ came so that we may have life and have life in its fullness, not certain portions of life, but have life in its fullness. The great prophet Jeremiah said, the plans I have for you are not to harm and not to destroy you, but my plans are to prosper you. We want to be at the table. We have been receiving crumbs that are falling from the table for far too long. We have been waiters at the table for far too long. We want to sit and dine, and that will never be handed over to us, because those who are at the center do not want those who are at the periphery to come and join the center. They are protecting their own interests. When white people came to this country, in closing, they did not come here by chance. They were following their economic interests, the markets. They were drawn by the markets. So when we talk of freedom, we must include the material, the spiritual, cognitive, and social welfare of God's people. I am saying, without a fear of contradiction, we need to rise and take it if no one is handing it over to us. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Reverend Gxamza. Dorah, in closing, how can we cry tears of hope?
I'm really worried to add to what Reverend has said. He really hit the nail on the head. I think everything that he said really resonates with me. We have to get a seat on the table as champions, as activists in communities. We cannot remain on the sidelines, as I said previously. However, it is important to realize that that is not going to be handed over to us on a silver platter. We will have to fight the good fight of faith, pushing at all fronts, knowing that we are victorious through him who already loved us, that we have got the authority. We might not have the power that the people who are sitting on the table already have got, that has been bestowed upon them. But we have the power of the Holy Ghost, the one that lives in the inside of us. There is no way that we can be denied. God can deny us the opportunity to be able to go and reclaim what rightfully belongs to the communities, their voice, the resources that needs to be allocated to them. We cannot always be spectators. We have to be there. And we have to really advance. We have to advance. We have to get organized. We have seen even now some of the most influential people allocating monies, not to government, but to the community organizations, to churches. And it means that we are doing something that is good. I think, as Dr. Mary has said, very self-organized communities. Yes, we get frustrated, but those frustrations, they mustn't deter us, because that's exactly what the devil or the enemy wants us to do. He wants to frustrate us. He wants us to feel helpless. We need to keep the faith. We need to know the authority that has been given to us, to tread upon the lions and cobras and use it in the true sense of the word, and trust God in this fight to advance. We need community activism over the vandalism that is taking place, over our children that are being led into drugs. We need to stand up and say, here and no further. It cannot go ahead while we are still alive. Our children are looking at us, our grandchildren are looking at us, are counting on us, and it is upon this generation to take it upon themselves with the power that has been bestowed to us by the Holy Spirit, and the authority that has been given to us. And knowing that he will give us favor, his glory will go ahead of us to make a way for us where there seems to be no way. We may be denied several times, but we will eventually be, we will be victorious. We will be able to get that which we believe belongs to the people. I think this past year, as I said, the election has shown that there is a paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift cannot go ahead without us. It cannot be left at the hands of the politicians. The community needs to rise. We need to do it together, however. We can't be divided. We have to be united. Distance, it doesn't really, it cannot be something that will keep us apart. Through platforms like this and many others, we need to build the bridges, hold hands, share experiences, local to local exchanges, peer-to-peer learning, and let's advance. And really, I think in the next 5 years, come the next local government election, we need to see some of the leaders that are here on that table, that we can back and say, I am willing to back so-and-so purely because I know they come from my community. And when they were elected, they didn't leave my community. They are still part of it. The problems that we are facing, they are also being affected by them. They see the challenges of the community firsthand, and they serve at the pleasure of the community. And as a result, we will start to see a paradigm shift. I think we are capable. We are more powerful than we give ourselves credit for. We have resources within the community. Every person that is sitting in a corporate, that is sitting in a government department, they are all part of a community. They all, at the end of the day, at the end of the work, at the end of their tenure, go back to some form of a community, which means that community is really the beginning of all things. It's where ideas need to be born, and leaders and champions need to be nurtured. So I know that we are advancing. I'm seeing some kind of a paradigm shift. It looks dark before the light comes, and that's the period where we are in. But we shouldn't despair. We should keep going. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dorah. Again, Dr. Mary, how do we cry tears of hope? And I'm going to ask us to go ahead and do about a minute and a half as we draw this conversation, to a close, with many, many more to come. Dr. Mary, from a health perspective, how do we cry tears of hope?
Thank you so much. And even to our panelists who've just, added wisdom and just even opened up my own eyes and ears and my heart to what we can achieve. It just reminds me of Romans 8, verse 18, that says, I do not consider the sufferings that I endure at the moment because it's nothing compared to what is going to be revealed in us. And so much has been revealed right now. And I believe that true as well for what is to come, even in our healthcare sector and as a pillar for our communities and broader South Africa. So I believe that we can cry tears of joy, and we will, and we should, or joy and hope, because you said hope. So I think there is a space for hope. I always tell my patients or those that I work with that as long as we have breath, that comes from God, but as long as we have breath in our lungs, hope is still there. There is still a chance of hope. So never give up on hope. Never give up on trying for the best. Again, the same as Isaiah 40:31 says, that, our strength cometh from the Lord, and he will rise us up like eagles. Where we faint, we shall not, because he will give us strength. So that's where our strength should come from. So there's no time to be hopeless. We are strengthened in what we do. What we're saying is that we want a broader public accountability, transparency. We want good governance. We want cooperation. And as a community, we're ready to do so. As I mentioned earlier, that I involve myself in community projects that do exactly that, from the COVID-19 disaster forum, from a telemedicine forum, from our other community outreach programs, including that of Bikoko Coalition, and currently our medical health broader community projects that we have, and our community intervention projects, and smaller organizations. I don't even want to say smaller, because that's the inappropriate word to use, because the impact that they have is so great, from the Khayil Foundation, Reach Foundation, and our community faith-based organizations. All of these have such an impact and look towards these key factors that I've mentioned to make an impact in our communities. And I love what Ms. Dorah Marema had said in terms of, finding our moral compass, because in each of these leadership portfolios come from our communities. It is us, so we can make the difference. So there is hope. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Valoshini, how about you?
Calvin?
Yes.
Well, in tough times and uncertainty, it is difficult to look beyond what's currently happening. So remember, there is light and at the end of the tunnel. So in ending, I like to just say that we have to just be joyful in hope. It's a Bible saying. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Leroy? Leroy, are you there?
I think Leroy might have been cut off. He mentioned that he was on generator in Eldos.
Great. Thanks for him. Tony, just some quick final remarks from you. And I want to thank Tony for being my partner in curating today's show, having facilitated, all of our, most of our panelists today as part of our Beloved Community Coalition partnerships that we have. Tony, any final thoughts you have?
Thank you to everyone of the panelists who actually participated, and your participation added greatly to our objective as Bikoko. And for that, I want to say thank you to each and every one of you. Encouraging sharing of information, ideas, and also showing us and telling us and reminding us of the hope that God always tells us and promises us. Because in every storm, if we have God with us in the storm, we will always come out of that storm victoriously. So knowing that, and to commit and also confirm that through our faith in God and our belief in Him, after darkness, there's surely light. I put my hand up, strongly so, and I close my hand, turning it into a fist by saying, I shall and I am standing for solutions. And in that we believe not only for South Africa, but for this world as a whole and all our people. Because indeed, we are global citizens in a global society. And together we can overcome all of the trials and tribulations of this world. I thank you all again. Thank you so much. God bless you all as we continue onward. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you, everyone. As we draw our time to a close, let me just thank all of our panelists. This is certainly the beginning of a much, much longer and deeper conversation because one thing that we have to and need to realize is that, as South Africans, though we've crossed the Red Sea of apartheid, we still find ourselves in the wilderness of nation building as social cohesion and Ubuntu elude us. And so in so doing, let me again utilize the words of Nelson Mandela inviting us to be all hands on deck. He said the following: after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. And so as we face these times of uncertainty and anxiety, may these words of resiliency, infect and affect us as we keep on keeping on, realizing that the time has come for us to see how we can bridge lamentation with the ongoing work of liberation, how we need to wake up and stay woke, as we challenge the misleadership that's going on in South Africa right now. Now, I know that there are many who are longing for the dehumanizing parts of apartheid, longing for the good old days. Well, I have news for you. Those days were not good. And living your life looking in the rearview mirror, just like many, here in the United States, long for, what can no longer be. We must continue to be progressive in our forward movement towards beloved community, as well as prophetic, in how we need to invite a Kairos moment to meet us once again and to deconstruct and reconstruct, deconstruct the old Odessa and Codessa and reconstruct a new Codessa, for a renewed South Africa with emphasis in renewed, that NEW, as we move forward. And so, our crying this day of the 28th commemoration of democracy and freedom in South Africa, we cry tears of hope because our hope is built on nothing less than God's love, the redemptive work of Jesus Christ, as well as the accompaniment of the Holy Spirit, not just for Christians, but for people of all faith persuasions, as we become what God has intended for us to be in Mzansi, the Republic of South Africa. So, we press on, we fight on, we face the rising sun until Uhuru arrives. Thanks so much. This has been Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Calvin Sauls, and we stay on the battlefield until we reach God's beloved world house. Peace out.